I've spent over 1,000 hours and 5 years studying how the best thinkers take notes, from Leonardo da Vinci to modern entrepreneurs. And 99% of people are missing the one thing that actually matters. Do you know what it is? What I discovered in Obsidian will change how your brain works. And not only will you realize what's missing, but stay tuned to find out what the simple thing you need to do to fix this is. All right, about 3 to 5 years ago, in that time, I was drowning in information. Notes everywhere, but when I needed an idea, nowhere to find it. My mind went blank. Lights on, but mind off. I could consume all day, because that's easy, but I couldn't create anything original. Does that sound familiar? I was smart, or so I thought, but I felt stupid. Then I became a senior mentor in Tiago Forte's Second Brain program, and I discovered the missing piece. This isn't just about organizing notes. It never was about the notes. It's about turning your scattered ideas and thoughts into a thinking machine that expands you and amplifies what you're able to do. And then you can generate ideas just like that on demand. Stay tuned because in this video, in a few minutes down the road, I'm going to be showing you the exact Obsidian template that transformed my thinking from reactive to strategic. And in typical fashion that I love to do, I'm going to be illustrating some of this. So this is where most of us are starting, where we're reactive. But where we want to get to is into the strategic. And what do you need to do? Well, the way we start is as easy as 1, 2, 3. We're going to be talking today about a simple system that makes it all work. So if you want to jump ahead, grab the free templates below, sign up, get them all. And if you need to go, I understand. But if you have a few more minutes, stay tuned with me and let's build this together. So I'm going to be revealing today, what are we talking about? In typical plan, there is one missing piece that actually separates the good from the great. Jim Collins taught us that, right, in his book, From Good to Great. But first, you need to see why most note-taking actually makes you think worse. Here's this interesting paradox. Whoops, that wasn't expected, but this is... Why is it that smart people think poorly? Have you ever thought about that? Most people who are the smartest that you know struggle the most with actually sharing their information. So the people that are super smart, I'm going to say, how would you describe someone right? The smart does not necessarily equal productive. Most people that are smart, what do? Well, let's illustrate it. They're collecting information. So in a way, there's this form of info hoarding. What they're doing, myself included, right? You could tell it from a lot of the books I have. We love this idea of having our own library. And libraries are great. Don't get me wrong, by any means. We love libraries. But rather than a library, what should we be building? Think about a laboratory. Let me show you the difference. Okay. Libraries have a lot of books, but in reality, they connect you to this information graveyard. In the information graveyard, ideas that are meant to be useful actually go to die. Laboratories, on the other hand, are all about experiments. And when you can start experimenting, when you can start moving beyond just simply collecting, now you can actually start taking action. And so when we actually examine it, in putting our thinking hat on as scientists who are exploring a laboratory, for example, are your ideas dead or are they alive? Such an interesting question, right? That kind of sets the context of what we're talking about. For me, I realized when I was really in my information hoarding days, over 20,000 notes, but I couldn't connect 2 ideas to save my life. I was collecting, which is what happens up on this stage, right? Let me change colors here. You're really good at collecting, but you're not creating. So this is the distinction, right? We're not here to simply learn about more PKM thinking or information. We want to move from this collecting element into a creating. And so what Obsidian does, which is why I'm so excited to talk about it, and I'm creating these series of videos, the Obsidian advantage is really the linking that takes you from collecting into connecting. Okay, and how do you do it? Well, in a typical library, if we continue with that analogy, you have books that are very linear. So we're going to have linear. And you might have something like a Dewey Decimal System. By the way, working at a library was my first job, so I know a thing or two about libraries. But when you are connecting, in this moment, you move from that linearity and you start to actually connect ideas, which equal new insights. Let me zoom in a little here. And these new insights are the way that you start actually building the thinking that's outside of your head, and it starts to become this thinking partnership. So let's drive this home. When I was a senior mentor, I was able to get that job and that responsibility because I'm very good at connecting different insights that are not immediately obvious. And what I've noticed is that a lot of smart people remain stuck because the thinking that leads to, I need to explore all these different variations and understand the problem really well, creates a solution that is too complicated. So thinking people, smart people like yourself, the solution is hard and complicated. Sharing a quick story here, I remember being in one of the course sessions. For some odd reason, the smarter we are, the smarter we feel that there has to be a struggle. Can you relate? Where instead of looking for the solution that's simple, we go for that which is harder because it's more satisfying. And hence, we go through this challenging time of trying to understand what is actually that we're talking about, rather than allowing the solution that's so simple and obvious to surface. Coming up in a few minutes, I'm going to show you the idea magnet system that automatically surfaces connections you'd never see to avoid and move away from this overcomplicating system. But first, let's talk about the simple framework. The simple framework that makes it all possible. What I'd like to teach you and share with you is what I call the SPARK method. So what does this mean? Forget complicated systems. The time for that is gone. The best thinkers know how to think in simple frameworks. And what happens with these simple frameworks is they expand and really compound over time. And here's where you start getting your return on investment, you start getting your dividends. This is when information goes from dead to alive, because now it's generating income, it's paying you the dividends. And so when you understand what Spark does, in this moment, you could start having a framework that helps clarify your own thinking inside of Obsidian. So, okay, so you've been waiting. What is Spark? Let's go ahead and define it here. Spark, at least how I understand it and how I'm defining it. Oops, we're going to put like this cool looking spark. Start with a seed. Really think about it like a seed bank. This is where random ideas and thoughts live. Random ideas. You need a place to capture these seeds. But P equals projects. Projects are the active work that's moving your life forward. Notice here, whenever you define a project, there has to be a time element. So let's talk about this. What makes a good project? There's a time, there's a who, there's a when, and then there's a decision or a metric that's measured. You may have heard of this analogy, but this is where the SMART thinking, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time, comes into practice. This acronym is a really good way of understanding where your projects are. Next, after the P, we have RA, which are the areas. So I learned that specifically when you're teaching para, and you've probably seen a bunch of videos on para. But areas, think about these as the areas or domains of your life that you're managing. And I'm going to teach you one key distinction that's often missed when people try to teach you the second brain idea. And that is, under these areas, think about these as responsibilities, domains, with a category. And so the distinction I was telling you about that's missed is most of us do not assign a role to these areas. So for instance, I give you an example here with health. It's not enough to just have an area of health, but what are you connecting? What tangible, specific outcome in the terms of an identity are you connecting to health? Is it to become a healthy father? Is it to become what's an Iron Man, right? Like Iron Man conqueror, right? This might sound kind of out there, but it actually isn't, because when you can take an identity and you can connect it to an area, then all of a sudden it becomes more interesting and you're moving forward. So it's not a project because it's not as concrete and defined, but an area is a container. You want to think about it that way. A container that allows you to define. And when you can define, when you can start to create and give tangible structure to this intangible managing of your life, you move forward. Okay. Next up, we have R, which stands for resources. From human resources to financial resources to the assets and elements in your environment, think about this in your world, that come together and start to create and give you structure. That's the reference material you return to. This could be books, this could be resources, this could be information as a resource, but combined together, okay, you start making forward. And finally, the way we actually integrate this is through knowledge, right? So knowledge is that information that you have, notice the key distinction here, curated, and you can benefit from. Okay, so how does this look like? How do we set this up in 5 minutes? Let me show you this in action. Watch how we go from a random idea thought and turn it into a connected knowledge vault in under 2 minutes using Obsidian. So are you ready for that? All right, let's take a look here. So I'm going to switch over now to my Obsidian vault. There's something here. Okay, here we go. So you're seeing empty vault. So nothing crazy. Simple vault, empty. I want to show you how I capture a random thought and turn it into a connected knowledge in under a couple of minutes. So let's think about this. So we just talked about Spark, right? So how would I clarify and bring some of that information? So we were talking about seeds, which equal seed bank. So I'm just going to translate and take some of my projects. We have areas. We have resources. Then we have knowledge. Okay. Spark, what it's actually doing is it's mirroring the way we naturally think. And that's kind of really interesting. Let me make this a little bit bigger for some of us who are more visually challenged, right? Kills. What we're looking at here is natural organization versus forced. As smart people, we like to think and complicate, when in reality, the more we struggle, the less progress we make. Here's kind of the insights to remember. Your brain doesn't think in folders. It thinks in connections. Spark, this idea of allowing the seeds that are really thoughts to surfaced up as projects, as areas, as resources, as knowledge, respects you in a natural way. All right. So here we are. You've already learned about Spark. You're starting to see this process. You might be thinking like, okay, how do I actually start moving from one spot to the other? And to do that, I'm going to teach you and share with you this really cool plugin. This is a brand new, so you won't see anything. I will get into the specifics, but I will tell you that I'm installing this plugin called a Kanban. And if you've never used a Kanban is quite simply as a way of organizing your same linear information, but into more of these blocks that enable you to move across a lateral from left to right process. So what you've seen me do right now is I went into the community settings, into the plugins, and I found a plugin called Kanban. And what Kanban is going to do now is by pressing Command P, I can go ahead and create a new board. And I'm going to call this my Spark board. Now, what I like about this is you can add many lists. So with a Spark board, I'm going to go ahead and minimize that. I could go ahead and start creating my seed bank. I'm going to call it. Oops. I can add, what you do here is you can edit. We're going to do the same with projects. Oops. Okay, so I'm going to call this my Spark board, just so I can kind of have something here on the left. And what we're doing here in a way is we're leveraging the power of linear thinking, but thinking across dimensions, right? And so now we start to actually connect, right? And you'll see what I mean by this. Because oftentimes, specifically as I'm going to add one more because I needed knowledge. We need to have a lot of ideas in our head, but we need to get them out. We need to process it. And the moment that you start to take your own ordinary note taking, so just to open it up as I'm going to split the page here to the right. If you click here on the top 3, you can actually switch and see the markdown. So what you're seeing over here on the left is really the same note, but seen differently, right? And so in order to put subcards in here, you have to use something like Command L, which is going to create a little to-do list. But under the seed bank, you can start capturing the different ideas that you're working through. So maybe in this moment, I'm talking about strategic thinking. Explore what this is. Explore it. Projects. All right, so we were talking about maybe create this YouTube video. You see, what are the areas of my life? Let's go with the big ones: health, wealth, relationships. What are the resources? I have a book collection, I have courses. And then the knowledge, right? What is this tacit and implicit? What are these things that I want to remember? So my knowledge is maybe Notion tutorials, right? I have that. I have Obsidian tutorials. I have YouTube playlists. AI prompts. Okay, so what I've done is I've just kind of connected a way that I could quickly move information and leverage the power of the Spark to start capturing ideas and putting it together here. All right, so this is good. But in order for us to get to the next level, we have to move from simply putting our ideas, thinking about them, and actually start to connect these individual nodes that are now individual into other nodes. All right, what am I talking about? The connection engine. You see, most people see individual nodes. The key to go from good to great is to see the connections. And so when you do something like a Kanban board, it's easier to start seeing the connections. Are you tracking? Are you following what I'm talking about? But what we want to get to the next level is when we can start training our brain to automatically spot connections between the notes that we're making. So what I'd like to introduce to you is the idea of the two link rule. The two link rule. I think I should have a little line here. What is it? In short, every node connects to at least two others. Such a simple thing, right? Believe me, I told you, it was going to be super simple that you'd be like, what? How does this work? One thing you can do here is start transforming and asking yourself, what does this connect to? What else exists in my vault or my thinking that I can relate this idea to? And this is how we relate. We do the double bracket. This could be a spark. What have I done? Let me go ahead and show you the local graph so you see. I've taken this new node that we've just created, and now it is showing me that there's a connection to the spark. Pretty cool, huh? When you start building these little links, which right now doesn't seem like much, but remember, this will compound. And when it compounds, what this enables you to do is actually start to create the networks for discovery that increase the serendipity, meaning the delightful ahas, right? The insights that lead to breakthroughs. So I'm saying the same thing in several ways, but these breakthroughs are the ways that you can shine, that you can come up with the unseen connections others haven't seen because you're actively working on generating insights automatically. And so remember, here's where we're starting to see and reveal these hidden patterns that otherwise would have been missed. So when you start seeing these patterns, these networked thoughts, so as I'm writing down here, as I'm creating here, check it out. I can quickly double bracket this, open this up. This network form of thinking reveals clusters in my own understanding. Okay, so maybe I might, for instance, find this idea interesting. Lead through breakthroughs. Okay, anytime that I like to start kind of prompting my mind, here's a way to get unstuck and release your mind from overthinking or maybe writer's block and lead to breakthroughs. Ask questions. You can always ask, what, why, how, when, what if, and take your statement, say it's a sentence, and convert it. And you might notice that I type with a lot of typos because when I'm going fast, I'm not trying to actively detain myself. But what I know is if I ask these questions, questions lead to new networked forms of connection within my mind. So when you start doing this type of work, when you start connecting and leading through the breakthroughs, now all of a sudden, I can actually even refactor this information. And this could start becoming the method. Ask questions no one else asks. Ask questions. Reveal insights. How it works. Right. So I can start taking the thinking and explore it even further. And what you're seeing over here on the right, I don't know if you've seen this, it's actually updating. So now when I do some of this little bits and pieces of thinking, I could come into each of these pages and say, hey, this network thought, this is actually like a seed leads to breakthroughs. It's not quite developed, but I can call it a seed, right? And what can I do? I can start going into my Spark board, and I could start saying like, hey, this is a seed. I can take these thoughts and actually move it over here. And it's kind of cool, right? Like you can start moving and playing around with your own thoughts and your ideas. And again, the process here is iterative. You're starting to connect and build. But again, don't be overwhelmed. We're keeping it super simple, right? I'm just trying to illustrate and share with you what starts happening when you are willing to move. And maybe this feels like, okay, this isn't really working for me. Move it around, customize it, start to think beyond the linear so you can activate the different parts of your mind. So let me close some of this stuff, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new note. You can also do that by pressing Command N. How do we actually get this working? How do we start to make this into a practice that feels useful, that's valuable to us? We do so when we create a weekly review and see what we know. Okay, so every week you have insights. 15 minutes of you reviewing, 15 minutes to review, which means go back and see what you've done, and you'll be amazed. How? I'm going to share with you, I'm sharing a few plugins for your review. There's this really cool plugin I really like to use. It's called Recent Notes. And what I like about Recent Notes, I'm installing it. Again, you're seeing this live because this is the stuff I use in my vaults. After you've installed it, go ahead and press in Recent Notes. You can actually go back and see what you've done. So you can see I haven't really touched this vault since the last time I did it. But what this enables you to do is like quickly go through it and start to see, okay, this is interesting. I did this today. I did this in the last 7 days. I did this weekly. And this process of review is how you start to surface up these insights that were prior to this lost, and now you're having a way of generating more insights. All right, so at the beginning I mentioned this thinking template. You're a few minutes away from this thinking template, but first, the mistake that kills 90% of attempts to think strategically. Let's talk about this problem a little bit. So I'm going to move on from this last idea. Hopefully that served you. Strategic thinking. Thinking without a G, right? Because it's cool. The thinking killer mistake. What could this be? Most people take notes without asking questions. I kind of alluded to it earlier in this video. If your notes don't make you think differently, then you're just hoarding. Plain and simple. If your notes don't ask questions, you're likely hoarding. What is thinking? Have you asked that? Consider this. Every time you think, you have to ask a question. Yes? No? Maybe so? If your notes aren't actively prompting you to consider a new perspective, to see a different way of understanding, in that moment, nothing's going to change. So to help you, here's the template. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. You can write this down, or again, download my free template and you get a copy of it. Ask yourself, what's the main insight? So what you're looking for here is getting to the core of your understanding. Asking yourself, what is this really about, right? Getting clear on a definition. How does this connect? This is connecting your linking of existing thinking into new unknown, unseen domains. What patterns do I see? Don't underestimate the power of what you're observing, what your perspective is informing, because these patterns are what are revealing to you that unique voice and perspective, which you're going to use in your creator journey. That you're going to use when you're teaching, when you're explaining, when you're coming up with insights. But first, you have to prompt it through the question. I love this next one. What questions does this raise? What we're looking at here with this question is future exploration. And then, how can I use this? This is the practical application. Most of us remain in the theory in what this was about, what we were thinking about. So let me call this what it is, right? The strategic. What is strategic? Have you ever wondered? Strategic is looking around the corner. So when you can act strategically, when you can take a piece of information and, like we did, and start to transform it into an insight, and then you have a process, which I'm sharing with you here with these 5 questions, now your value just becomes so much more powerful. This is how a lot of my mentees think now. Like, they no longer just take information and allow themselves to go through the process of just having it there. No. Now they're actively moving. Because remember what we were talking about earlier? Whoops. We are moving from, I drew it a little earlier in this video. We're moving ourselves from being these reactive, unsure, not really, we're these collectors, we're these dead, unalived, right? We're moving from being reactive to being strategic. And the power here is when you're strategic, you're looking around the corner, you're starting to connect and actively create. So the questions work. They'll do the work for you, and they're the most powerful leverage tool you can start using, specifically as you're doing deeper thinking. In 60 seconds, I'm about to give you everything, the complete system, all the templates, the implementation guide, but first, the one habit that makes it automatic. And that, my friends, is, ready for it? The daily thinking practice. What's the difference? There's the people who build strategic thinking. If you're stuck around this long, thank you, by the way. I'm honored that you're watching so far. And those who don't. Consistent. Notice the keyword here, practice. Consistency for its own sake of consistency is like walking for the sake of walking. It doesn't do you anything. But what we're really thinking here, and what I want you to embed and see the value of, is building a strategic thinking routine. And what does that look like? I'm going to give you a 10-minute breakdown here. And give me a copy of my notes here, but here's how you can do it. In the morning, you can review yesterday's connections. You can then capture, right, using the strategic template, the one that we just discovered, and give yourself that open loop so that in the evening, maybe you're looking for something like finding one new connection. And when you start doing this, when you start changing your routine, or every day you have a morning, an evening, and a capture practice, your brain starts to become a natural connection-making machine. You start seeing the patterns everywhere. And that's what the promise of this video, right? Is how do you get your thinking to be automatic and to start actually using a tool like Obsidian to start connecting and seeing. And again, you start seeing like, okay, we talked about this. In this case, we can talk it to our strategic thinking. And now we start seeing like practices I can do. The weekly routine. Next steps from here. So you make this automatic in Obsidian when you set up the templates for consistency. When you start using a daily note that starts to connect and take these prompts and actually pump them in anytime you're working on something. And in the end, when you've done that, what do you see? You've got your seats, you've got projects, you've got your areas, your resources, and your knowledge And it starts to expand and build this wonderful collection of your own thinking revealed to you in a way that starts to make sense, in a way that feels like what it is, right? Which is a way of you understanding and coming to see what it is all about. You have everything now, my friend. The Spark system for organizing inside of Obsidian, the connection engine, we talked about that for strategic thinking, to see around the corner, to see and start mapping what it's all about. The daily practice that makes it automatic. Follow this system, and in 3 weeks, you'll notice your thinking changing. Ideas are going to come easier. Connections will be obvious, and people are going to start asking you, how do you see all these things when they simply miss it? And you have the unfair advantage that you know how to synthesize and connect in a way that others just can't, because you're asking and leveraging the most powerful tool, which again, thousands of people I've worked for, and they haven't understood this one key, which is the power of the questions you're asking. Here's what I want you to do now. Open Obsidian and create one note using the strategic template, right? Link it to 2 existing notes, and that's it. After you've done that, let me know. Comment below with the word connected when you've created your first strategic note and 2 links. I'll personally check your progress and shoot over a link if you're interested in resources that can actually help you deepen your thinking here. But connecting it so that your Obsidian Vault actually starts to generate the content and create for you in a way that most people will never discover. But when you do it, your thinking will multiply by 5, 10, 100x. This is something below and you're interested, join my community. There are more resources and my email newsletter. Happy to share more, and let's talk. Thank you so much for your attention, and stay tuned. There's other videos probably somewhere below next to the right. You're going to continue watching and learning about the power of improving your thinking through systems that work.